All right. James, you set us up nicely before we started to record. We've got a top 5 to 10 team in the country. That's the consensus out there by just about anyone that knows anything. Not that every one of those people know what they're talking about, but most of those then follow the herd along with everybody else that tells them how they should be thinking about these teams. And it came out to a number 8 ranking in the preseason poll by AP, number 8 in the coaches poll. Some people have them higher. And then the recruiting is following up on that. And that's almost nothing but positive, except for the rivals don't necessarily like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It's interesting. And there's been a lot of the tweets today from a lot of notable FSU tweeters. It's were we like this when we were bad? Were we this bad? It's kind of like one of those things where you're like, oh my God, is this how we sounded for those few years? But before we get into the past or the current situation, I mean, it is one of those things where it does seem like everybody is discussing Florida State. Pick Six Previews, which lauds themselves as the most accurate since 2012 preseason college football pick'em. They have Florida State as a playing in the national championship, if I remember correctly, but definitely going to the playoffs. Numerous people have that. I actually am now a Gator Bowl scout in the past few weeks. So like I'm learning about the college bowl process, and I actually have on my channel, I'm going to teach everybody about how bowls get picked. But the Gator Bowl basically said you won't fall any further than the Gator Bowl. We can promise you that, no matter what happens, which is normally a January 1st bowl, but it's December 29th this year. So people are predicting them to make some noise, to at least be able to do what they did last year. But and when you think about returning, I believe it was 85% of the production that you had on both sides of the ball last year on a 10-win team with 3 games that they lost to ranked opponents, but not blowouts, much more competitive than they've been in the past. It's really not asinine to really think that Florida State would do what they need to do. Also, when you look at Florida State in our history, I mean, Mark, you're a little older than me. You're not that much older than us, but you've been around for what you've got a chance to see a lot of good football. And actually, if I ever become rich, I am going to get into filmmaking. And my buddy said I should make the next 30 for 30, how the state of Florida took over college football. And so, Mark, you probably got a chance to actually witness this in real time over the last 40 years. 3 schools put themselves into the blue blood category. But over the past 40 years, Florida State has won. Outside of, I'd argue, the last 5 to 6 have been pretty bad. And when they won, recruiting was very, very good. Jimbo Fisher, there was a quote one of my teammates said, James, name me somebody in the state of Florida that Jimbo wanted that he didn't get. And when you really go back and you look at the recruiting, it's kind of hard to argue. We didn't know about those battles. Like, did Alabama? Maybe they did. Maybe Alabama felt they did. But did Alabama really come in when Jimbo Fisher was the head coach and take people from the state of Florida that Jimbo Fisher had a bullseye on? And I'd argue no. So now Florida State winning 10 games, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Florida State should be able to have a top 5 recruiting class, especially when you look at the development that he has had with guys from the transfer portal. Like, I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but he's not getting one and dones and putting them in the NFL. He's getting guys with 2 to 3 years of eligibility left. So he's developing those guys. And now their project, they're going to probably, Florida State should be one of the teams that have the most guys drafted. It should be one of those teams talked about. So that's really where a lot of the momentum is coming. And guys like Chris, guys like George, myself, Mike Norvell himself told y'all, hey, just chill out. Fireworks are meant to be shot in July. And boy, did they do it. And boy, did people have people been upset. And I think that's when you know you're back, is when, if your rivals aren't saying anything and they're not afraid and they're not questioning, it's kind of like, if a tree fell in the woods, did it make a noise? It's like, if they're not questioning that you must be cheating, then are you really a dominant program? Are you really a big dog barking, as my boy Big Noah would say?
Before we cut George loose here, when you frame it like that, Big game. This is what I think of. The first time that Florida State made the Orange Bowl and played Oklahoma, and they ended up playing 2 consecutive years against Oklahoma, the second of which was an 18-17 game down to the wire. The first one, OU handled them pretty well. There were people all over the place, like just throwing up their hands like, where did this team come from? Florida State's in an Orange Bowl? Like, what is going on? And I followed college football even at, I was like 8 or 9 years old at the time, but followed it as closely as you could pre-internet. Like I, read everything and memorized everything in sight. So it didn't surprise me because I saw it had been going on for a couple of years. Bobby Bowden scheduled everybody in sight, even when he had to travel to Nebraska and Michigan and Ohio State and Notre Dame. He said, we'll take anybody on. Yeah, we'll come see you. We'll get it done. And then Miami, the same thing a couple of years later in '83, when they made the national championship game against Nebraska, people were like, who are they? It really did take over college football by storm because everybody was used to the same 4 or 5 players, just kind of similar to the way it's been here in the playoff era. But George, your thoughts about the FSU hype?
Yeah, man, look, I grew up, I graduated high school in 2009, so I was a little kid when Snoop Menace and Peter Warwick and those guys were running around, and I fell in love with that, that second title team FSU had when they were just on top of the world, wire to wire, number ones. And one thing that comes with that, they had the program, they had all these TV shows and things that were modeled around those great teams back then. And they were the villains, people love to hate us just as much as we love, as fans love to watch them. And you're getting a little bit of that now. It's like you sign 2 5-stars in 2 weeks after not signing, but maybe one here and there over the past 3 or 4 years. All of a sudden, you've got some kind of illicit chicken farm going on, and things aren't on the up and up. But like Chris said today in our space, like that's what you want. If people are saying, that we're stealing money, or not stealing money, but buying players with money, et cetera, then we must be doing something right. We're finally in the top 5 of high school recruiting to go along with all these portal stars we have. A lot of people have talked about the ability to sustain a team and put together a championship team using the portal. And we're going to find out this year, because when you look at these preseason polls, all these watch lists, et cetera, it's transfers. It's Jordan Travis, it's Johnny Wilson, up and down the roster, transfers. And you look at the blue chip ratio, it hovers around 40 to 50%. But if you ask me, when you look at the transfers and the guys that have came in that haven't necessarily been blue chip guys, but came in, like James was saying, as redshirt freshmen with 3 and 4 years left, it's that 21 one-time transfer really changed everything. These transfers that we have aren't the transfers that people grew up on, and I'm just ready for September 3rd to get here and show the world what we got.
We're happy that Chris Frazier is here from Spear Addicts. Get on over to Spear Addicts. He and James will get together on Thursday night. Mark it down, Thursday night, 7:30 Eastern time over on Spear Addicts. We'll drop the link in the chat. Chris, of course, good to have you. And your take on FSU hype on the field for the 2023 team, and then all the recruiting buzz.
Well, it started out that you can't build a team with portal players. It's not sustainable. You can't do this. That's what our foes would say. Now that Florida State has moved on to where it looks like we're going to have some type of championship caliber team, it's, wait till next year. Y'all lose all these guys and you don't have anybody behind them and all this other stuff. But the hype that's behind Florida State, some would say that it's, it is what it's called as hype. It's too much hype. It's not been proven by Florida State that it deserves the type of hype that it's getting. And I think it's complete opposite of that. I think that they deserve the hype that they're getting. I think that they deserve the opportunity to be in the top 10, top 15 coming into the year. But now it's time to go out there and prove to everybody that the hype is 100% legitimate. And you're going to have your people that when Florida State does do what they're supposed to. We told you so. The hype was real, blah, blah, blah. And if Florida State was to fall behind and not beat LSU in this game, you're going to have your people say, told you it was just hype. Wasn't enough. I mean, it's how the thing goes. It's football. But I think that Florida State deserves all the hype that they're getting based off of the development that Florida State coaches have put into these athletes. I understand that Jordan Travis is a transfer, but Jordan Travis was not the type of quarterback that he was before he got with Norvell and Tony Tokarts and a little bit of Kenny Dillingham. What he's developed into is by far better than what he was when he got here. And that includes the Trey Bensons. That includes all of these guys. The reason the hype is there and the reason that it doesn't matter if they're transfers or if they're high school or if they're walk-ons, the reason that this doesn't matter is because they still have to be developed. They still have to be shown what it is that their assignments are going to be, and then they have to execute those assignments. If you were a star player, so for instance, can Florida State take credit for Keon Coleman if he blows up this year? Not necessarily, because he was blown up at Michigan State. But what you pay attention to is you critique what did he not do well at Michigan State, and now what is he doing well at Florida State? And for people to say that Florida State coaches aren't developing talent, I think that's comical, because I don't care if you get NFL players, if you don't teach and you don't coach and you don't put them in the right circumstances to succeed, and they're going to fail. This game's not – it's not a hard game to learn, where I think most people think it is, but it's a hard game to execute every play. Every play you have to give it all, because the other guy on the other side is going to be doing the same thing to stop you from doing what you're supposed to. Your execution's trying to be eliminated by their execution. So I think that Florida State's hype is real, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Florida State fan. I think that Tennessee's hype is real. I think LSU hype is real. I think there's a lot of things that are going on in college football that maybe the fan bases, in even college football itself, wasn't ready for it. The only thing that would outweigh the transfer portal is NIL. College football, the fan base, probably the athletes themselves were not ready for NIL. But the only thing that comes second to that is probably the transfer portal. Everybody wasn't ready for top-tier players to come in, and that would be a way you could build a program. So just ready for week 1 against LSU, and we'll see if this hype is what we've all tried to make it out to be, or if the naysayers are correct.
And the fun thing about it, but also the frustrating, aggravating, and annoying part of it, is that regardless of what the result is against LSU, so let's say those two teams are exactly what they are expected to be, top 5 to 10 teams in the nation.